Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Allison Scobber, Consolidated Planning Group, and today we've got Dr. James Williams with us today, and he is going to be going over an exciting topic of avoiding the top 10 mistakes in transitioning. So we're excited to have Dr. Williams back with us again today. Again, Allison Scobber, Consolidated Planning Group. We are a holistic financial planning firm, special needs financial planning firm, and we really take a holistic approach to planning, custom designing plans for people based off of their needs, wants, and goals. What we're most proud of is we put out a lot of educational events on a weekly, monthly basis, and all of the topics that we put out there are really geared towards families with special needs kids, special needs adults, people transitioning, etc. All topics surrounding special needs planning and kind of key steps and things that you may need to have on your checklist as things that you are looking into, checking on, and kind of crossing off the list. So anyway, we're happy to be here with you today. We're excited, Dr. Williams, that you could be with us again. So without any further ado, I'm going to just turn everything over to you and let you run.
Okay, sounds good. And definitely check out their Facebook group. I liked it as well. You'll get, I think if they do that right, Allison, they'll get all the notifications as these are posted too. So they can kind of follow. And she has some really good ones we've done previously that you definitely want to check out.
Yes, for sure. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So I presented a couple of different sessions with Allison and her team. And this one is, to be honest, probably one of my favorites because one of the things that I think is so crucial when we're looking at transition skills is we want to start early. What they say, early, often, but also specifically, we want to be very targeted in our approach. We want to make sure that we're addressing the needs that students have that are most relevant vocationally for them. And so a lot of what I talk about today is along those lines. What's also really, I think, great about this presentation is these top 10 mistakes are not based on just what I think we should be doing or what I think it should look like. It's based on a combination of both research and then also practical development and practical application. So my colleague and I, Bruce Bloom, we do vocational evaluations across the country, in Texas, of course, but also across the country. I'm actually going to Iowa this afternoon for an evaluation and working with the school district up there. And so we do these evaluations. We do IEEs. We do them where we'll come in and just kind of give a neutral opinion. And we tend to see these top 10 things over and over and over again across state lines, across disabilities, and across ages even. So I hope this will be some good information for you to keep in mind. Again, these are not specific issues to specific schools or specific students. These are just things we see all over the place. A little bit about my background in case this is your first time joining us. My name is Dr. James Williams. So I am the Chief Operating Officer of Bloom Consulting. I'm also an advanced certified autism specialist, a certified rehab counselor. I run I'm our national pre-TS director, and also I'm rolling out our Campus Connections college support program that I'm really excited about and we talked about previously. I have a lot of different hats I wear here at Bloom. I'm also an adjunct professor of special education. So I teach actually in Iowa, funny enough, at a school online. I work with graduate students and helping them develop their educational research skills. And then I also have the pleasure of being on the Developmental Disability Task Force and Advisory Council with Texas Workforce Commission's VR services. So I have a lot of different hats I wear. All of them are things I enjoy and kind of contribute and connect together. Just like you can visit a CPG's website and social media, I encourage you to visit ours. Our website is at the bottom of this slide here. It's a great resource. We've got some good resources and links and things on there, including to them as well. But also we've got some great ways to contact us. So if you can't find my email or you can't find a way to contact us and you just need to look it up, if you go to our website, you can call us through there. You can also send us a message through there as well.
Also, just from a housekeeping perspective, in an effort to allow you to kind of just get through your presentation today, we do love your questions. So we would like you to put your questions in your chat box today, and then we're going to get to the questions at the end of the presentation. So definitely put them out there. We're going to get to just as many as we can. And also, today's presentation and the slides and everything is being recorded, and those registered will get an email later today or tomorrow with the slides and the presentation. So thanks so much.
Definitely. So jumping right in, let's talk about our goals. And so when we're looking at transition, this is one of the first mistakes we see is that goals are too broad. They don't include the specific steps a student will need to reach that goal. So For example, I've changed the name of the student, obviously, to protect their confidentiality, but these are real examples. And so Bob will go to college when he graduates. Again, not a bad goal at all. And I'm thrilled that Bob wants to do that, but it's not really specific enough. So we really need to be careful, because we want to make sure that we're also describing the little steps and very important steps that it's going to take to get Bob from where he is now, let's say as a senior maybe, or a junior in high school, to him graduating and going to college. So again, it's not a bad goal. It's just a bit too broad. So we want to make sure we have some kind of steps between where he is now and where he's going to go. Goals are sometimes too specific. That's the other thing we see. So, for example, in this one, Bob will not wear blue clothing more than 3 days a week. I kid you not, I'm not making that up. That is a real goal that was on a transition IEP that we read. I won't say where. But again, for Bob, and this particular student in this case had some significant independent living skills deficits, significant social deficits. His color of clothing was by far the least important thing that he needed to address, by far. He really needed to work on so many other skills that were just much bigger fish, if you will, in terms of him being successfully employed and attending college successfully. So super, super important that we're also not kind of getting too minute and too specific to where we're kind of losing the forest for the trees. We're not really looking at the big picture of, hey, what does this student need to be successful in employment or in post-secondary education? And so we got to be careful too, because we definitely can go from that one extreme to the other, right? Goals disregard a student's functioning. I see that absolutely all the time, where we have a goal that's just based solely on hopes and dreams and interests. Now, I'm a big believer in student and informed choice. I want a student to be a part of that process. I want them to tell us what they want to do. And so please don't take me to say that I don't. I quite the opposite. However, we can't just look only at interest. We can't look only at, hey, someone's interested in something, because I'll tell you, a lot of us are interested in things, but we have no capacity to do that work. I tell people all the time, I'm always fascinated by art. I think it's really interesting. That does not mean that I can paint, and I promise you I cannot. So please know, it's important. Interests should be considered, but they can't be considered solely. Same with the family's hopes and dreams. I'm a big believer in shooting high. I'm a big believer in people having reasonable goals and shooting, to grow themselves personally, professionally, educationally, all of that. But we also, again, can't just solely rely on hopes and dreams and even just interests. We really need to consider the other dimensions of a student in terms of their capacity and their functionality. So, current academic functioning, current physical functioning, can they physically do the work? A good example Bruce always gives with physical functioning, he had a client who wanted to be an anesthesiologist. Well, the challenge with that is this client was in a wheelchair. And if you know anything about anesthesiology, can't say the word today, you have to be able to physically get on top of the person and administer it to them physically. There's really not a physical way to accommodate that person to do that job. And so, yes, the person had the intellectual capacity. Yes, he had the interest. But being an anesthesiologist, given his physical limitations, is just not going to happen. There's not a way to accommodate him to bridge that gap. Unfortunately, now there are other things that this individual could do be very successful at that are in the medical field, and that's exactly what we work with them on. So, that we have to be careful there too. We want to make sure we don't set people up for failure. So we have to be careful that we're not selecting goals or things just based on, oh, that person says they want to do that. Well, that's great. I want to do a lot of things, but can I do them? Well, that's a different story, right? And then mental or intellectual functioning. I kid you not. This is an example that we have and a pretty sad one, because a student, on their IEP and in their plan said, okay, I want to be a heart surgeon. The student has a 3rd grade reading level. The issue with that is they're never going to pass the MCAT to get admitted. It's just not going to happen. If you can't read the questions, how can you respond to the questions? And so a huge, huge barrier there. And again, it's not really anybody's opinion. It's not going to happen. And so we have to be really, really careful that we're not, again, setting students up for failure. And the problem with this young man is he really had this goal for a really long time, and we didn't get involved right until he graduated, and he had been told, oh yeah, you could do that. That's a total reasonable goal for you. Now, I will tell you what we learned about this individual is it wasn't really that he wanted to be a heart surgeon. He wanted to work in a hospital. And there are tons of jobs that this young man could do with a 3rd grade reading level in a hospital, tons. There really is. There's lots of opportunities. So it's not that he was totally, off base. He wasn't. He just was looking at a career that really wasn't going to happen for him, but he didn't realize, a lot of the folks working with him didn't realize why he wanted to do that. And what it really was is he wanted to work in a hospital and he wanted to wear scrubs. He wanted to wear scrubs, or he wanted to wear a white lab coat. there are jobs that do not involve being a heart surgeon that you get to do one of those things. So again, really important that we're looking at and we're understanding and accepting what functioning is, knowing that yeah, there is a range of functioning, but again, we need to be reasonable and we don't want to set up a student for failure. That's never good. Sometimes the goals focus solely on academics. So a big thing that we see is, it'll just focus on academics and they'll just have academic goals. And again, I'm not saying academics aren't important or needed. They are, especially when we're talking about like functional reading and math, very important to work. But we have to be careful that we're also looking at the fact that IDEA, especially if you're a public school, talks not just about academics, it talks about post-secondary education and independent living. And so we can't just ignore those two really important areas because frankly, the independent living and post-secondary employment piece tends to be where we see a lot of students struggling and where they don't have a lot of goals to work on those. Another thing I will add in, IQ is not always a predictor of success. So one of the services we've been providing for about the last 12 years since Boone Consulting was founded is job placement and supported employment. And we do primarily do those services in we do a little bit in the Houston area, but for the most part, it's in our Austin location. And we have placed individuals with intellectual disabilities very successfully in competitive integrated employment. Many times, multiple examples I could give you across industries that we've done that. The individual to this day is still working there and doing very well. So a low intellectual functioning is really not a reason why a person can't work at all, because I've seen quite the opposite. Vice versa, I've also seen this other challenge where people will say, well, Bob has such a high IQ that, hey, he should be able just to do this and he should totally be able to work, right? Because, he has a high IQ, so of course he's going to be successful. And that's not always true either. A lot of the individuals we've placed in work can do the job academically, intellectually, if you will, but that doesn't mean that they have the social skills capacity or the independent living functioning to get to work on time, to show up in their uniform, to do the things they need to do. And so we got to be careful because we can't look at high functioning intellectual intellectual capacity as a guarantee to work, just like we can't look at low functioning as a guarantee that this individual can't work. And so really, really important. And again, I have this example here, 17 years old, has a goal of successfully answering 7 out of 10 algebra problems correctly, but his mother dresses and bathes him every day. This is a really sad situation too, because the individual was so functional and so capable and had unlimited potential if we could just get in there. And so this was a tough one. And we were called into this case to really give some feedback to both the parent and the school about what we could do, because this individual had so much more capacity than frankly, that his goals really shot for. The other piece that we see is the goals disregard a student's local job market. So for example, we do a lot of evaluations in rural Texas, going to rural Iowa, like I said today. The capacity in terms of job opportunities and the job market, if you will, in those rural areas is frankly much more limited than it is in a city, let's say like Austin or Houston, where you've got multiple industries, several employers in each industry, sometimes dozens and dozens and hundreds of employers in each industry. And so your pool of jobs is just frankly drastically smaller, and your industries are just far less, and you have far less options. So an example I give people is we've been in evaluation with a student at a district in far East Texas. And in that town, there was really 2 employers. There was a gas station, which generally only employed 1 or 2 people at a time, so not a lot of jobs there, or the chicken plucking farm, or that was, and so most people worked at the chicken plucking farm because that was the job that frankly paid better, and it was a job that there was a lot of need for. And that's it. In that small town, it was a very small town, a couple hundred people at most that lived there, very small. And, those were the opportunities. Now, you could go about an hour west or an hour east to get to a bigger city where there were lots of job opportunities, but you had to be able to do that. And if you can't drive, how can you do that? So really, really important too, that we really look at the actual job market that the student is either living in or they're able to move to. Because I have had students that have moved to a larger job market to get the job they wanted. And I think that's great if you can do that, but not all families can do that. Whether it's limited means or transportation, it just doesn't always happen. So a great example here, Bob has a BA in history because it's his hobby, but he doesn't want to teach. Well, with a BA in history, even in a bigger area or more urban area, your options are pretty limited. A lot of your, people will say, well, what about museums? What about libraries? Well, first of all, a lot of those are volunteer positions. They're not paid positions. And if they are paid positions, you need a master's, not a bachelor's. So it can be a really, really big thing. And again, I love history. It's actually one of my passions. So I certainly, I almost actually got a degree in history, to be honest. But I didn't because of the employability reason. And so we really need to be careful that we're really focusing on what the student can do in the job market that they are able to access or where they live, right? The goals are not student-centered. This is really important. So as certified rehab counselors, my colleagues and I, we are big believers in informed choice. Okay, it's a huge tenet of VR in which it says that a student, we don't make a choice for a student or for an adult. We say, here are your options. Here's a menu. You select. You tell us what you want to do based on the assessments, the evaluations that we've done. And so our goal is not to tell people what to do. It's to give people information and allow them to make a choice. And so that's super, super important, even with younger students. A great example, we saw Bob's parents want him to be an accountant because it pays well, and his dad's an accountant. So they sent him to college for that, but he's not interested. He skips class for the lack of interest, doesn't pass anyways, and then their money and time is wasted. So we have to really make sure that there is buy-in from a student to do, especially if it's college, but honestly, even work. We tell families, we can help get someone with a disability a job. That's our job, but we can't make them show up every day on time. We can't rouse them out of bed to make sure they get dressed and get to the job site. If they skip on an interview that we set up for them, we can't do anything about that. So there has to be buy-in from the individual, because otherwise they're going to either sabotage their situation or they're just not going to be invested, and they're not going to put in their full effort to make it successful. And that's super, super important. So again, we want to make sure those goals are as student-centered as they can be. They're not based on vocational evaluation. So evidence-based functional vocational evaluation either wasn't conducted, or if it was done by staff who really don't have that background. So I can tell you, I'm a former special ed teacher, public and private school. And I can tell you in Texas, as in many other states, individuals or teachers that are becoming special ed teachers, we receive usually 0 courses in transition, usually. If we're lucky, it's maybe a paragraph or 2 in a textbook, that's it. There is no course on transition. There is no course on vocational evaluation. There is no course on job development. The people in the special education world that are good at it, frankly, they learned it just like I did. They learned it on the job. We learned it by doing it. We learned it by learning from people that came before us. And that's great. And I've learned amazing things from those people. But we have to keep that in mind. And what's frustrating to me, because this is absolutely not a teacher's fault, is an individual will not have a transition evaluation, or if they do, it's very limited. And the parents will be like, well, hey, this doesn't give us enough information to really make a decision. And they're right, it doesn't. But that's also because they're being asked by the teachers being asked with no training and no information to do something they don't really have any training or information to do. And so we have to be really understanding of that. And that's not the teacher's fault in any way. That's a systems issue. One that I'm very vocal on with people when I talk to them about the fact that we really need, if we want teachers to be able to do transition, we need to give them that training. We need to give them that coursework. We need to give them that information. Again, that's not the teacher's issue. That is a systems and a training issue. So really important that we're making decisions based on vocational evaluation, and it's with somebody that's qualified. And again, it doesn't have to be us. There's other people out there. I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of people like us out there. I wish we did. That's kind of another whole problem. That's a whole different presentation. But it doesn't have to be us. It just needs to be someone that has that training and background so they know what they're doing. Great example I think I gave last time. I was telling Allison and everybody on the call, you don't go to, a foot doctor to get heart surgery, and it's the same with your transition. You go to the expert, you go to people that know what they're doing. And that's what we would expect in the medical field. And yet for some reason in transition, we don't seem to think that applies. And I promise you it does. Insufficient connection to adult services. So connection to adult service providers and agencies was either not provided. And that's not normally what I see. What I see though is this other piece where it was the parent was given the information and they were told, like, for example, if we're in Texas, said like, oh, you need to contact TWSVRS or TWC, you need to contact them. Okay, why? Well, they don't really tell them why. They just say you need to contact them, or they've been invited, or something like that. That doesn't tell a parent what they do. So glad Allison and her team had some folks from there on here to talk about what they do, because that's so important, that parent education piece. But that has to happen. We need to make those intelligent referrals, not just get on a wait list and call TWC. No, why do you need to get on a wait list? Why do you need to call TWC? What can they do? What do they do? All of those are those things that parents need to know and students need to know to make those, again, informed choices about what they need to do for their life. Great example here, I have just about Medicaid waiver wait lists. Right now it's between 10 to 15 years for some of the wait lists, which is awful. And so, again, if they're not on that early, then that's going to be a huge issue as well. A lack of parent training. This is something that honestly we get frustrated with. So, as a provider, we work, 99% for the most part directly with customers, and we love that work. However, a lot of our customers' parents need support too. They need training. They need vocational support. They need to understand, okay, now my son or daughter is going to work. What does that mean for me as a parent of an adult child? What do I need to be doing? How can I support them in getting a job? How can I support them in going to college? Well, they don't get that training. And then we say, well, the parent this, the parent that. Well, they didn't get training. So, they're doing the best they can. So it's really important too that we're not just focusing on the individual, we're giving the parent resources and we're doing parent training. There's some great organizations out there, family to family, parent to parent, do really great parent training. I wish there was far more of it because it's so needed. But that's something that we really have to consider too, is the parents may not have the training and the resources they need to successfully support the individual. And again, that's not the parent's fault. That's a systems issue and something that has to be addressed. And then mistake 10, not enough prep time. This one I can honestly say I see getting better, which is great. And that is where we're not starting transition early enough to really do what we need to do to get that person ready for post-secondary education and employment. So we're not starting transition until 14, but if we got an individual with multiple disabilities, a lot of complex needs, maybe some medical challenges, visual impairment, you name it, seizures maybe, they're going to need a lot of support to get that plan together so that they can be successful when they actually exit at 18. Even if they stay to 21, that may not be enough time. So really making sure that we're not seeing transition as something we start at 14. That's not really the point. The point is that we're really starting transition as soon as we can. And we're having that conversation with those individuals and the parents. And we're looking at their coursework and we're building their coursework, not around what the state says they need, but building their coursework around, getting their credits, but more importantly, what do they need post-school? What do they need to be doing post-school? And that conversation, frankly, should be happening in elementary school, middle school. It certainly shouldn't be waiting till high school. So the results of these mistakes. So if you're not aware, recently the Department of Labor put out some new stats, and they do this all the time. So why would you say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, this year it was a big deal because it's the first time that they really put them out year over year with COVID kind of considered. So the challenges we have with COVID and lockdowns and what that looked like. Well, unfortunately, no surprise to anyone on this call, I'm sure, COVID had a significant effect on the employment of all individuals, but also particularly people with disabilities. So what we looked at is the latest stats that came out February 2021, looking back that previous year in their look back. About 17.9% of individuals or adults with disabilities were actively participating in the workforce. Either they were employed or they were unemployed but seeking work actively. Prior to COVID, we were in the 19s. We were about 2% higher. So you may think, well, 2%, it's not that big of a deal. Actually, it's a huge deal because we're talking 2% of the entire United States population of people with disabilities. So 2%, of that population that was working is now not actively participating in the workforce. That is a huge, huge problem. We're talking thousands and thousands of people. So huge, huge issue. And to be fair, people without disabilities also had a pretty significant drop. It was not quite proportional, but it was pretty close at 61%. So, and that was closer, that was much higher. I think actually it was a little bit more. It was like 3% higher or 4% higher. So really a concern. And I tell people, we need to keep that in mind that, things were tough before COVID. Well, honestly, they're even tougher now because now we're dealing with things that have nothing to do with disability. We're dealing with job market factors and all those other things. Then moving to workforce participation, rate of adults with ASD. So if we just look at autism, for example, just as one population to look at, about 55.1% of young adults with autism held paying jobs during their first 6 years out of high school. That actually doesn't sound so bad when you're looking at that 17%. But the problem is that was actually the lowest category 6 months out of high school of all the categories under IDEA. So they just looked at students that were receiving special ed services only, right? They didn't look at the total disability population, of which some folks with disabilities never get special ed services. We know that. And some of them don't need it, and that's fine. So that's something to really think about as well, is that, even autism in particular seems to be really affected. The one that I think kills me on this whole slide that just I struggle with and really bothers me is this next one, which is 85% approximately of college graduates with ASD are unemployed. So one of the challenges we see is a lot of families say, well, if we just get him through college, he'll have a job and everything will be fine. Or if we just get him through this training program, he'll get a job and everything will be fine. Unfortunately, that's not really what we're seeing, particularly with that population. We're seeing that a lot of times they have college degrees or college certificates or training programs. And then what they're doing is they're ending up graduating to the couch anyways. they're exiting high school, they're getting that training, but then they're not getting a job, so they're ending up living with mom and dad, even with that training, which is so sad and absolutely unnecessary. And so that's also a huge issue to consider. And then lastly, underemployment, again, of adults with ASD, a population that I tend to focus on and serve. Many who are higher functioning are in those lower wage jobs. So they're working minimum wage jobs. And that's because that's the job that they can get, even though maybe they have that college degree or they have even a master's degree. And so the unfortunate part of that is with that wage issue, they're also forced to continue to depend on SSI. They're forced to continue to depend on the family members for support. And that creates stress on the family as a whole. And that's not a good thing either. So really important to look at. And then this stat, about 80% of young adults with ASD work part-time, averaging about $9.11 an hour. It sounds like a lot when we compare to, $7.25 minimum wage, but no, it's really not, especially in, some of your higher cost of living areas. I mean, California, $9.11 an hour is going to put you, in poverty. So that's a huge challenge as well to consider. And so, I always tell people I'm very much of a mindset of if it's not broke, don't fix it. Unfortunately, it is kind of broke though in this case. So we really do need to look differently at how we're planning transition goals and how we're getting students ready, because the results we're getting are not the results that we should be getting, and they're definitely not the results that we could be getting, for sure. So 7 habits of highly successful individuals with disabilities. So I definitely, these are the things that I see over and over again really have a big effect on if someone with a disability of any age, any disability is successful. So first is self-advocacy. It's the ability to communicate your talent, skills, and needed accommodations to others, right? So it's a communication method. It's, saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's the needs that I have. Is that something you can help me with? Whether that's going to a job and getting accommodations on the job, or that's going to a school or a training program, super important skill. The second piece is self-determination. So I tell people, self-advocacy is a communication thing. Self-determination is really an action. Someone who is self-determined takes actions. They're steering and driving their car of life. They are saying, hey, I want to go to this school. I want to go to this job. I want to hang out with these friends. I want to socialize in these settings. I want to go to this church. I want to, do this, in my time off. That's a self-determined individual, and self-advocacy is the start of that, but self-determination is really where that rubber meets the road. And individuals that are self-determined, disability or not, can be incredibly successful in their lives. I've seen it firsthand many times. Motivation. Big part that I tell people, it's that internal superpower of a great individual with or without a disability. It can be encouraged and explained. We can try to motivate people, but we can't force it upon someone. We can't say, you're motivated, do it. Like, it doesn't work that way. And an example I give with motivation is, if you're not aware of this, I was diagnosed myself with high functioning autism, what was Asperger's at the time when I was 12 years old. So I'm in my mid 30s now. And people have asked me a lot of times, well, how are you successful? What have you done differently? And what do you feel like, helped you? And to be honest, I don't have a definitive answer to that. The only thing that I always come up with when I really thought about this question is motivation. I'm someone that's always been relatively self-motivated. Like, I wanted to have my own house. I wanted to have my own car. I wanted to achieve some things in my life because I wanted that for myself. And again, motivation is so powerful. Disability or not, it's amazing what someone can do. Accommodations, right? Being able to get the accommodations you need, school, on the job if it's needed. Full versus partial disclosure, the ability to talk about your disability, not in a textbook format, but just, hey, here's what I need to be successful in my classes, or here, with a disability counselor, here's what I need to be successful on a job site, with a manager, with an employer, or a job coach. Soft skills, how do you relate and interact with other people, right? Huge need. I will tell you, of the individuals that we've placed at this point over the last 12 years, we've placed literally thousands of individuals with disabilities in competitive integrated employment. And by far, the number one thing that we see that leads to job loss is a lack of social skills, a lack of soft skills to work with customers, fellow employees, with your boss. Those are where we see people losing jobs. What we don't see is number 7, hard skills. We have clients that are incredibly talented, that are very, very capable of doing the hard skills of a job. They can do whatever that job requires them to do. That's not the problem. It's the social piece. It's all those other, like we say, very soft skills, but very important skills that need to be taught and worked on, that really seem to be the issue. Thoughts on success. I talked a little bit about this earlier, but motivation, right, is a really big piece of it. Someone has to be motivated to really want to show up to work, to really want to try. You can't, that's not something you can force upon someone else. I've had some parents that the parents are super motivated for the individual to work, but the individual is not motivated at all to work. Well, How's that going to work? It's not, because the parents don't go to work, the student does, or the individual does. So if parents want them to work, but the student's not going to show up on time, well, they're probably going to get fired, and there's nothing you can do about that. So motivation really, you can't substitute it, you can't discount it. It's really important. Ambitious goals, though, is part of it too. If your goals are really low and you set the bar low, you're not going to be as successful as you could be. So yeah, you need to be motivated, but you also have to have ambitious goals that actually use that motivation and harness it to be successful. Resilience, I think we would all argue in the last year, we've had to be far more resilient than we've ever had to be before. And so resilience is a big part of that, though. Another term that you'll use, and you see this in the research a lot, you'll hear resilience, or you'll hear the word grit, students that have grit, or individuals with disabilities that have grit. Same concept. Can they push through those difficult times and situations? Can they get terminated, or can they get laid off from a job and still go back and work again? Can they have trouble one semester at college, but still go back and give it another shot with some support? That resilience piece is huge. We've worked with some individuals who they've tried working once or twice. It did not go well both times, and they're done. They don't want to work anymore. They've been so kind of burned by it, if you will, that they're just not resilient anymore. They don't want to go back. They don't want to try anymore. And again, I get it. Once you get to that point, it's hard to come back from that. Confidence, not overly confident, but confident. And I always tell people, confident in what you're good at and confident in what you need help in. It takes a lot of strength and courage to ask for help. But that's part of it, is you're confident in knowing, hey, I'm really good at this, but I am not good at this. And I'm going to ask, whether it's my parents or my boss or my job coach or whoever that is, for that support, because I know I need help there. I'm confident in that. And then direction, right? That's why I do what I do. So we do vocational evaluations just to give direction to people. Now, we give direction and people decide to do other things and go the other way. That's okay. That's their right as a human. And we want them to make those decisions. But the idea with our assessments and when we work with people is we're trying to give them some direction and guidance. That's it. And from there, they make those decisions. And then a big thing I think that's crucial, especially for younger individuals, is my parents in my life had to really make that transition from advocates to advisors. When a student is younger, they really need an advocate, especially when they're in middle school and they're in elementary school. They really need a parent and someone that wants to support them and help them be that advocate. That they really need that, and I get that. However, as they go on, high school and then especially in adulthood, parents have to kind of slowly, and sometimes it's very slowly, I'll admit, literally, finger by finger, but slowly they need to make that transition to the individual advocating for those needs. And again, it's not overnight thing, it never is, but it needs to be, that transition has to happen for that individual to be successful. So my study, one of the things that I did with my doctoral program is I looked at connections, quantitative connections between people with disabilities. Particularly in my case, I looked at autism 26 years and older in the US and what their parents did. Or didn't do in this case. And we had a great response rate. We talked to parents from 48 states, which I was really happy about. What was the challenge, though, is that we looked at 3 different factors, and 2 of them we didn't see any connection. So we didn't see any connection in terms of parent income, race, ethnicity, culture, educational level, income level. We didn't see any connection there. Now, some studies have, but again, in my study, we didn't. Parental behaviors, we didn't really see connections there. Where we saw connections were expectations. In my study, what we found is parental expectations had a meaningful relationship with successful employment. So a great way of looking at that in more layman's terms is a parent's positive expectations really alone may increase the likelihood of their adult child achieving a successful employment outcome. So just a parent believing, all things being equal, just believing that their son or daughter is capable of successful employment, just that alone can actually cause it to happen. And that's not really that surprising to somebody who's done this work for a long time. And people on this call that have done that, that's probably not a surprise to you. But I think it's one of those very subtle but important points, because I've had parents that'll talk to me after presentations and they'll say, hey, great information. We loved your presentation. Thanks for sharing. However, my son or daughter has intellectual disability and they can't do that. Or, my son or daughter has this physical or other impairment, and so they can't do that. And unfortunately, what some people don't realize is just the fact that you think they can't actually probably will keep them from doing it, or at least not help them achieve it at minimum. And so we really need to flip that, and we really need to be positive in terms of our expectations. And sometimes we're going to set expectations that a student or an adult doesn't meet, but that is far better than setting lower expectations that they certainly will meet that really don't exploit their full potential. So really, really important to think of it that way. What about functioning level? I talked about that earlier, but again, a common thing I hear, especially with individuals that have what I would consider higher functioning disabilities, where not just autism, but like learning disabilities, autism, high functioning CP, some of those things where people are like, well, they had so many AP classes and so many school activities and all these other things that we just didn't have time to work on social skills. We didn't have time to work on independent living or vocational skills. Well, unfortunately, one of the things that I tell people is, guess what? Employers don't really care how many AP classes you took. Honestly, really, colleges don't either. They care if you meet their entrance requirements one way or the other. That's not what's important to them. So we really need to be careful that our priorities are the priorities of the next phase of a person's life, not just arbitrarily our priorities. And so we really want to keep that in mind. I've seen individuals who, frankly, they would have been much better served by taking some study skills classes or social skills classes and support, far more better served by doing that than they would have taken an AP class in history. I get that the kid liked history, no debate there. But again, it's not about what we like, it's about what we need. And if we need that support and we need to get that in school, well, then we need to get that. And so it's tough. And I get it. It's a fine line. It is a balance. There's no doubt. A comprehensive vocational evaluation designed to empower informed choice. So, a big thing is, and this is just an example of the types of things we do. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example. Okay. But, when we really look at comprehensive vocational evaluation, it's not just one assessment. It's not just an interest checklist. It's not just one assessment, even a good one. Okay. There's some great ones out there. It is a multi-battery assessment. It includes a variety of instruments, psychometrics, multiple perspectives, a review of past data and testing. And this one I think is super important, a situational or environmental work assessment. One of the things we know about not just people on the spectrum, but people with various disabilities is our environment affects, and not just disabilities, in fact, everyone, all of us. Environment affects us. We respond differently in different environments. We all do. And so that needs to be considered too. We've had some individuals who totally are employable, but in certain environments, they're just not functional. And so we have to find the environments where they are functional and find the environments that do fit them and do fit their needs and the challenges that they have. So really important too, that we're not just looking at paper pencil testing. We're not just looking at, one assessment. We're looking at, all of those things plus some environmental assessment as well. And these are just some examples of different instruments, things like achievement, personality, interests, abilities, values, learning styles, executive functioning. Again, not an exhaustive list. I could give you 5 slides of assessment tools that you could use. The point is it needs to be multi-battery. It needs to be broad. It needs to be beyond just one thing or one type of assessment. This piece here, and I'm good. I was shooting for 12:45, so I'm doing good today. This slide here is really just more of a resource slide for you guys. So rather than have me talk about all of our programs, because if you've been to our website, we have a lot. It's easier just to give you some links to explore on your own. So we have a lot of different programs. I'm going to talk about 2 of them in particular. And if you want to know more, I'm going to let you on your own time dive into them. But one of them is our Campus Connections College Support Program. And so that is something that we have a pending contract with TWC that we're working on now. We already have that contract in Nevada, and then we're also doing it private pay as well across Nevada, Texas, and in California. And it's a college support program that really kind of goes what I call start to closure. So we start with an individual coming out of high school who's going to college. We provide support through that college experience, whether that's 2 years, 4 years, certificate, what have you. But then we don't stop there, which is I think part of the challenge we have with a lot of college issues. And right now is we don't stop there. Then we help provide job placement and support to get them placed based on that degree post program. So really excited about that. You'll be hearing a lot more about it in the next, I would say next couple months or so as we officially launch it. But we're launching that in the fall of 2021. So I'm really excited about that. In Texas, I know most of our folks on here are probably from Texas. Our 2 initial launch partners, definitely where we're starting, but not where we're ending. Our launch partners now are Concordia University in Austin, and then Sam Houston State University in Huntsville. And then we have about 4 different schools in Nevada as well that I'm happy to provide if you reach out to us. So that's one of our things. And we also do our pre-ETS programs, which basically are pre-employment training services, right? So if you have an individual with a disability who needs support and training pre-placement, so they're not ready for a job yet, maybe they're only 14 or 15, right? And yeah, they're not ready for a job in a lot of cases. That's fine. But what they can do is they can start getting some training and support to do that. And so we provide those services. A lot of those, the majority are VR funded in Texas or Nevada. However, we do have some parents that private pay, and that's totally fine. And then the last thing I would talk about is, of course, our vocational evaluation services. And so you can check out that. I gave you a little bit of information on that today, but if that's something you're interested in, let us know. We do those for TWSVRS as a vendor, but we also do them privately. Honestly, we actually do more private ones than we do VR funded ones, but we do offer both. So again, if you have interest in any of these things on your own time, click on our links, check them out, and if you have questions, just reach out to us. We also have a really cool resource link page that we have as well. And that resource link page, it's up there. We link to great resources like CPG and other folks out there. So check it out. It's just, it's just for your reference. If you're looking for a provider, you're looking for something, check it out. It is not an exhaustive list by any means. It's just the people I know about or the people that have reached out to me. So if you know of a resource that is not on there, please email me and let me know. I'm happy to add it. And so, again, we want to try to provide direction to parents and resources to parents. A lot of our evaluations, we provide this list as well, because, we can give you a lot of recommendations. We can do the evaluation, but we can't do all the services. I always tell people, if you want financial planning, please don't call us. Please call Alice. That's not my background. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to admit that I do. So please know that is go to the people and the experts that have that background. So that is it for me, Allison. I'm going to switch over to your slide.
I want to, before I kind of dive into the slide, I want to just address a couple of questions. In the Q&A, we had our first question is, are you familiar with Leander ISD in Austin, Cedar Park, and what kind of training do they give special ed teachers on transition services? How are their transition services in any functional vocational evaluation?
Oh, great example. Yes, I'm very familiar with them. So we actually work with them a lot to provide services. We have a very close partnership with that school district. And honestly, and it says, okay, someone don't shoot me, but I think they do probably the best transition services in the state of Texas. I'm a little biased, but I'll tell you why. One, all of the students that are in special ed in their district go through some type of comprehensive planning system in their ARDs or their IEPs. So they use a couple of different methods depending on the age. They use the visit, which is a really good a planning tool. They also use person-centered planning, which is also a great planning tool. So first, I will say on the planning side of things, transition planning, they really are, in my opinion, one of the best in the whole district or in the whole state. They really do a fabulous job with that. Their functional vocational evaluation. For your average student, they are probably going to do everything you need, to be honest, in my opinion. Now, we've been called in to work with Leander ISD by both the district directly and parents, and sometimes both, when it's a really complicated, challenging case, right? Where nobody knows. Everybody's like, hey, we need a third party like Bloom to come in and to give us some thoughts. We do that, but for the most part, honestly, they do a really great job, and I'm really proud of them in that way. And their transition coordinator has been a friend of mine, honestly, for probably 15 years. And she is a leader in our state in transition services, and she's their transition director, Denise Geiger. So, great. So honestly, I can only say great things. Now, what I would tell you though is if you have questions, because I feel like they do such a great job, ask those questions. If you need to get someone in, so for example, Denise is one person. It's a pretty large growing district. So, if you want to talk to her, reach out to her. And if you have questions about transition, she's an expert. So reach out to her. I ask her questions and she asks us questions. So, again, really great district. And I'm not saying all that to say other districts don't do good assessment too, but they're just one that I know about. And I know in terms of comprehensiveness, they're one of the most comprehensive. They also start earlier. And that's one of the things I really like is a lot of their students that are in special ed, they're doing transition assessment with them when they're in elementary school or middle school. They're not waiting till high school, which is what I really, really love. So honestly, I hope that gives you some good information and insight, but again, they really do some great work.
Okay, another question is, what if our schools are not offering classes for these social skills for higher level students that are not in life skills? What do we do for that? Where do they get this kind of training? And on the short tails of that, do we have any recommendation for teachers to be getting some training, to receive training on administering functional vocational evaluations?
Sure. So we actually, now again, I'm not trying to plug us, but we provide that training. So we've actually done that for several school districts. where we've come in, and if we can't do it, we know some other folks. Denise Bagger's actually one of them who's worked with other districts, not just her own, to do some really fantastic assessments for vocational evaluations. So if we can't do it, we'll recommend you to someone like her or somebody else. But yeah, I mean, that's a service we've done. So it's kind of funny, we've talked to some school districts and said, look, you can pay for us one at a time to evaluate a bunch of your students, or you can pay for us once to come in and train you and your teachers, and then you don't need us anymore, or you'll hardly ever need us. And that's honestly what we would prefer. I would much rather, my evaluation team consists of 3 people. Right now we're booked out at least 2 months, and we get more every day. So this is a service where honestly we have kind of a wait list, because we just have a lot of people across the country that want to use us for this right now. And it's a good problem to have, but I'm saying this because we may need to refer you to somebody else. And so knowing that, we would rather work with a district on the district level. And we've done that with a couple of districts up to this point, where we've came in and said, hey, here are things and protocols that your teachers can do. Here are some things that your staff can do. And so we can definitely do that. I would really need to look at the district and what they're already doing to give specific recommendations. That's more of an offline conversation, but definitely that's something we could provide. So you can reach out to me, and we can talk about that, because I think that's definitely something. If we can't do it, we can get you to somebody who can.
And as for the parent, I think I kind of threw that out there as 2 questions, kind of oddly. But as for the parent, as far as getting some help on these soft skills on some of these things, do you have some suggestions on that? If parents are working with their kids, which these parents are, where are some places, or what are some things that they can help work on these soft skills? And then doesn't your evaluation determine what skills they need to work on, and then you guys put plans in place? Is that kind of how that works?
Yes, I mean, to a point. So when we're coming in and doing an IEE, our job isn't really to implement. Our job is to evaluate, assess, provide recommendations, and then step back. So we do give those resources, though. Yes, we can. If a school district is like, hey, we want to provide this service to a student, where can we get curriculum? Oh, absolutely. We can totally recommend transition curriculums that work well. We can tell you the ones we use. We can tell you the ones that we've worked on and my staff and I have developed. So that's something we can do for sure. There are some really good curriculums out there that parents can do with students and with their children. There are, but I'm going to warn you. You're their parent, you're not their teacher. And some students just don't respond very well, or don't respond as well to a parent giving instruction versus a teacher giving instruction. Now, if the student's already homeschooled, or maybe you've already provided a lot of instruction, it's probably not a big deal. But I know some students where parents have said, hey, I tried to work on this curriculum with them and they didn't want to do it. And it was pulling teeth, versus, our staff teaches a class, the students come to that class and everything's fine. And they're like, oh yeah, this is great. And they listen to you. Why won't they listen to me? And then of course we laugh. We're like, well, because your mom and dad, what do you know, right? So it's just unfortunate, but the truth. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we can do and provide resources to districts on transition curriculums. There are some really good ones out there. There are also some really bad ones out there. Just to be honest, there's also some that are really good, but they're crazy expensive. You don't need a crazy expensive curriculum to do transition. You really don't. You can buy one, and trust me, there's publishers that will sell you one. I've looked at them myself for our work, but you don't need that. Sometimes what you really need, especially if it's soft skills, is you can take some really great resources. A place I send a lot of people for social skills support and curriculum is Social Thinking. If you go to Social Thinking's website, Michelle Garcia Winter, she's been around. She's kind of who I learned from, and she's been around since the 90s. So I think it's socialthinking.org, I believe is the website. But they're on our website if I got it wrong. So sorry about that if I did. But they're a great resource. And so sometimes you can take some of those off the shelf books and curriculums and make a really great curriculum for, frankly, $40, $50 versus, yeah, you could spend $15,000 on this big elaborate system, but that's not always what you need, because some students don't need that big elaborate system. They just need they need really to fill in some skills gaps. And if those gaps are filled in, then they're good. And so, and that's really an individualized thing. And that's why I tell people, I joke all the time, people give me like 3 sentences about their son or daughter and say, evaluate them. That's not how it works. Like that's not enough. I have to really do an evaluation to really understand what people do and to really be able to provide support. And so, yeah. And one thing, I saw a question here, I don't know if it was to you or to Allison, to us, but we provide a lot of our services, our vocational evaluations, we do across the country. So we can do them in any state. We actually can do them out of the country, although with COVID, can't really get there right now, but, but we technically could. And so we can definitely do that. In terms of VR, our VR funding contracts are limited right now to Nevada and to Texas. So if you wanted something VR funded, those are the only two states we're engaged in contracts with right now. That may change, but for now, just those two. So otherwise,
not everybody knows what VR is. I know that's a term that
yes.
me and you throw around on a regular basis, but could you just advise,
Sure.
the what that is?
Sure. So every state, doesn't matter what state, Texas included, Nevada included, everybody has vocational rehabilitation, has an agency that's charged with providing vocational rehabilitation services. In Texas, their name has changed a couple of times. They used to be DARS, but they're now Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehabilitation Services. I know it's a lot, but that's our Texas agency. In Nevada, they're called BVR, but it's the tomato, right? It's the same agency, just doing different work in different states. And so the cool thing with VR is the whole purpose around VR generally is how do they help people with disabilities obtain competitive integrative employment? That is the goal. Now, they do a lot of services to get to that goal. And there's honestly so many, I can't give you the list because it depends on the state and they all offer a lot of different things. But the goal is no matter what the service is, the pipeline is get them to competitive integrative employment with and that if they have a disability. So that's generally what VR is. It's an adult services agency. Two important things to know about them real quick. One, eligibility. It's not an entitlement agency. So you have to be eligible for VR. It's not like IDEA or special ed where if you have a disability and you meet those criteria, you're entitled. No. With VR, you have to be eligible. That's the first thing. The other thing to know is every state is a little bit different in what they offer. And so, you really need to reach out to your VR contact in your state or in your area to really get that information. And Allison, her team hosted a fabulous presentation. When was it, Allison? Like a month ago with Marilyn?
Yes, and I actually think we have her scheduled again on the 30th. In fact, vocational rehab is such a hot topic for our families that are transitioning. I believe that we have her scheduled every month for the next several months because there's a lot of people that are missing this. So, and it's a lot of information to take in, and she does a pretty great job at explaining the services. There is funding. VR has funding. There's not like a waiting list, so it's not an entitlement program. But if you've got a child that is willing, I mean, that's one of the big things is they have to have a disability, but they also have to be willing to work and willing to do what they need to do and that kind of thing. But anyway, lots of great information, and we'll put that out there. We do have a YouTube channel with past recordings and stuff like that, and we've got future recordings coming in. We also had somebody from the chat say that the ARCIL, Center for Independent Living, provide transition classes, employment readiness, soft skills, social skills, self-advocacy skills, such as that. So that could also be another resource. And then also, so we have a question. What is the Texas Agency for VR?
Oh, okay, I got
it. You've got that one. And then Brian asked about, if you had a list of programs, evidence-based transition curriculum. Do you have a list of that?
I have a couple. Reach out to us. If you just shoot me an email, I can send you the ones that we use and the ones that we really like. I can also send you ones we don't really like. So I can provide that. It's not really a chat thing, but I can shoot it in an email to you, no problem.
And we're going to provide all that contact information right here at the end, and also we're going to send an email out that will have all of our contact information in there as well. Let me just.
And Allison, can I? There's one that Brian asked, and I'm going to bring it up because it's an important point. Brian's right. In some states, there are wait lists for VR, but I want you to know in Texas, there's not, and in Nevada, there's not. But there are some states. I'll give you an example. Arizona, there is. So there's some states that do what they call order of selection. I can't even say the word. Order of selection, which basically means that they only serve the most significantly disabled individuals, and they start there. And if they have money left, which to be frank, they hardly ever do, then they serve people with less significant disabilities. But I will say Nevada and Texas are not those states, and that really is state by state. Arizona does order of selection, but I don't think New Mexico does, and I know Nevada does, and I know Texas does. So it really just depends on what state you're in if you're watching this, and every state. Also, some states change. So like, for instance, some states start out not doing order of selection, and then let's say they have a funding crunch and then they implement order of selection. It really just is a state by state thing. I will say most states, I'm going to use the word most do not, but there are some that do.
Well, and also what I've found is like some states do something well, like we kind of talked about, previously before that our waiting list for our waiver list are 10 to 15 years, and some would even argue 17 years long. And so we're not doing that well. So there's some other things that Texas is doing well and
Yeah.
some things that they're not, and it kind of ebbs and flows. Will you just go back just one slide for me real quick, and
Yeah.
then I'll
Sorry, I
I'll
don't know
have you
why it
switch
did
back.
that
No,
actually. I
no,
didn't
that's
do
okay.
that.
No
Let me
worries.
try this again. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, perfect. So just, we like to just put this out there kind of at the end of the presentation. Everything basically on this list are things that we have done presentations on or will be doing presentation on in the coming weeks and months. We do have a YouTube channel that'll be in your email with the recording. You can like and follow that YouTube channel and listen to past recordings. But as a special needs parent, these are just some things that should be on your radar as it relates to transitioning, as it relates to special needs planning. And when we have this many people on a meeting, we've got people that are all along the way in their journey, just starting out, new diagnosis, overwhelmed, that are pretty far along in their journey and are just checking themselves, kind of against changing the changing atmosphere as it relates to special needs planning. But all of these things are important, as it relates to future benefits and future care and the overall future plan for your loved one with special needs and what's going to happen when you're gone or when you're no longer able to care for your loved ones. So just watch out for these other topics. I always say take a quick screenshot of this or something. Just put that on your list. When it comes to planning, everything doesn't happen overnight. And there's no, I call it no looking back. Okay. So it's no looking back. I hear people say, I'd be embarrassed for you to know what I haven't done or something like that. It's about looking forward. It's not,
Yes.
beating ourselves up about what we haven't done. It's about looking forward. And you're here today. And we're definitely happy for you being here today as well. You can go ahead and forward to the next slide for
Sure.
our contact information. And I would just like to say for Dr. Williams, I just find you a breath of fresh air and an encouragement to others. I mean, you yourself have a disability and you're an overcomer, you're an achiever, you're well accomplished, you're well educated, and look at what you're doing for the lives of people with disabilities. So that's exciting. And
Thank you.
one of the things as a parent with two kids with disabilities, I say, why? Why do I need Bloom's services? Why do I need Bloom Consulting? And what is the difference? What's the difference between VR and Bloom? And I liken it, and if it's okay with you to say, Dr. Williams, is kind of a private assessment. There are public assessments or things that you can get free or
Sure.
cheap or basically out there, and the assessment follows who pays for it usually.
Yes.
Like it's not complete.
Unfortunately, it shouldn't, but it does.
It's not completely as comprehensive as what you would like it to be when it tends to be free or cheap. This is a private assessment for you to really get a real handle on what the skills are, what the deficits are, and where you need to go from here. And you can check that, check and balance against other assessments that you've had in the past or things like that. But this is a choice of I'm going to do a private assessment as opposed to accept a school assessment or accept. And I'm not saying school assessments are bad. I'm just saying when you really want to know everything with no holds bar, whatever you need to know, I think this is kind of the way I look at it, and coming to Bloom and why I would come, why would I would come to Bloom. So, okay, I think I might have.
I say we have a couple in the Q&A. I was just reading. I think some of them we addressed, but or we've talked about. Well, I'll grab this one because I think this is a great point. One of the attendees said, what about a homeschool? And said, my daughter's 16, will they provide transition services? Yes. You need to talk with the school and figure and look at how that works. But I know they will. The other thing too is a lot of people, I don't think people understand this. They think like with VR, for example, that VR won't serve homeschool students. That's not true, and there's no truth to that whatsoever. They absolutely will. They will.
Well,
Also
and I
some people,
and I have
yeah.
a contact for that. So, and
Yes.
definitely, we have a lot of homeschooled families that are definitely getting services through VR, and it depends on the district from what we've seen. I mean, we've got people from all across the United States. We got people from Texas or whatever, and even in Texas, it just depends on the district. are more willing than others to provide services. Others, I mean, it's like pulling eye teeth to get help. So
Yep.
it really just depends on who is in the seat, and obviously you have rights to contact the state, to contact at the district level. You can contact at the local level. There's a lot of ways around that, but
Yep.
I would say it's from what I've seen at families, it's very inconsistent.
Yes.
So,
Even in the same district, like you said, sometimes it's campus to campus. Like I've had families that have said, "What about this district?" And then my response is, "Well, what campus?" Because some campuses totally have transition. They do, and then others, it's like, what's transition? So it really, I think Elson, you bring up a really good point. It's not a blanket across the board across the state. It's not blanket across the district. It really is campus to campus. And I think, but like you said, knowing what your rights are, asking for that support. The last thing I would add there, I think Mona asked a good question about seventh grade special ed when he enters. What should I ask for? Reach out to us, and we can kind of give you some examples of what that may look like, Mona. So we can definitely support that. But I think seventh grade is a great time to start having those conversations for sure. Especially eighth grade, we actually do a lot of our assessments are done in either eighth or ninth grade, and the reason why is because that's about the time that we're really we should already be transition planning, but at that point we're really digging in and we're really getting to the meat at that point. And so again, reach out to us and we'll definitely help.
And Dr. Williams, I agree with that. Earlier is better, and we've got kids with executive functioning issues, high functioning autism, ADHD. There's so many, right?
Yes.
So that earlier, the better. Because I have conversations weekly with people that say, I was hopeful that my child was going to go to college, and I realize now that he's 18 or he's almost 18, and he's not there yet from an executive functioning perspective.
Yeah.
And so we see a lot of that. And one last thing, we had something in the Q&A that I think is a very valid point. And yes, this is something that we deal with every day, and sometimes I think we even forget it. We talked about the wait list.
Yes.
We're always talking about the waiting list or the waiver list in Texas and how long it is, and do you get on the list? But a lot of people don't know what this is, and there are a myriad of waivers: yes waiver, HCS, class.
Oh, gosh,
yeah. There's a handful of waivers, and it depends on what your disability is, and if your IQ is below 70, 75, intellectual disabilities. But anyway, they waive off. They're there to prevent your loved one from being institutionalized, and so they waive off cost of they may provide nursing service. There's a whole bunch of things that they may provide.
Yeah, it's a huge list.
It's a huge list. And so basically what you want to do is you want to get your child on these lists, and you're going to contact, and you can contact us and we can tell you more about this, but the local intellectual disabilities area in your area. For Houston, for instance, it's the Harris Center. For Fort Bend County, for instance, it's Texana. Okay, and you're going to get yourself on these lists. Okay, and then also there's an 800 number for the class list, because you think you're putting yourself on all the lists and you're not.
And you're
you
not.
actually have to call.
Yeah.
You actually have to call
That's the
800
one you have to
number
call.
to get your kids on the class list. So that is a very valid point. And if your kids are not on the list, get them on the list like yesterday, as soon as possible. And some would argue in Texas that you should just automatically put your kids on the list when they're born, whether they have disabilities or not, because you just don't know. And it's going to be 17
Yep.
years before you get services. But anyway,
Yep.
it's kind of a running joke in Texas. I don't know if it's valid or not.
Oh, yeah. No, regardless of disability, put them on the list.
Put them on the list.
I don't
never
need to
know.
just put them on the list. Yeah.
So
But,
anyway,
and remember, you can always decline too. People don't know that. It's like, if they're on the list, if you don't need the services or they're not eligible, that's fine. You'll decline. They'll pull you off. It's fine. But no, I agree. I think getting on it sooner than later is better. And even if some of the lists have like pretty strict IQ requirements, even if you're not sure, get them on there anyways. I think that's the best idea.
And things can change over the years. We've seen families that the kids' IQ was over, and then there was a diagnosis or something happened, and then it was under. So we've seen all kinds of things all across the board. So anyway, well, I show that we are out of time for today. Dr. Williams, you did a fantastic job, and I appreciate you being with us again today. And we look forward to partnering with you again. For all our families that joined us today, thank you again for being here, and we will reach out with the recording and all of the contact information that we talked about during the meeting. And you can look out for future presentations. I believe next month we actually have a presentation on waivers next month.
Oh, fabulous.
And we actually have an old one that we did previously that's fantastic on the YouTube channel, and it's all about Texas waivers. So sorry for anybody in the other states, but we do have some information out there on that. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week.
Awesome.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye now.